We clocked him at 3 seconds flat from home to first. Said, this is from Luke Easter, former Cleveland Indians great. I've seen a lot of fast ones, but Rabbit is the fastest, and that includes guys like Sam Jethro. If you want to find out who Rabbit is, make sure to follow along in this episode of Locked On Guardians. We're going to get into the deep history of Cleveland baseball, the Negro Leagues, and progressive baseball in general on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. We cover your team, the Cleveland Guardians, every day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. I'm Jeff. Over there is Justin. I want to point out, too, I have a lightsaber as well. I heard someone kind of in our comments on YouTube saying, Justin, they laughed. And we are lightsabers all around. This is equal opportunity Star Wars-ness. Last Wednesday, I believe we both finished our show and said we got to go watch The Mandalorian. We did not watch it together, for those who are curious. No. But, I've been saying I want to do this for a while, and I didn't want to do just in, Black History Month, talk about the Negro Leagues, because Cleveland has such a rich history. And I kind of wanted to, I've been reading, what I recommend is a really great book, Crossing the Line, and it's Black major leaguers from 1947 to 1959. And yes, the stats they use are not my favorite stats. They're definitely the old school metrics. But you get a nice little bio on every player. And I learned a lot. So I kind of want to start there before I get into the players in Cleveland's own history and some of the really interesting players that came through Cleveland. Because I will stand that the reason this team was as good as they were in the late 40s and then into the 50s was they jumped in feet first. I'm going to get myself in trouble. I believe Bill Veeck, right? That's his first name.
Veeck is in Wreck.
Yep.
Great book
so
as well.
Veeck dove right in. Like Branch Rickey gets credit, but Veeck might have signed more players of color. And then when he left, he kept at it, and it helped Cleveland become a winner. But what was interesting in this book, one, is to see that a lot of the comments then, like when players were breaking through, there were a lot of people being like, that's not fair. Does this mean I can go play in the Negro Leagues? Like we see people complain, say, does that mean I can now go there? It's like, no, because you probably wouldn't have been good enough. Let's be honest. If you weren't good enough to make it in the big leagues at the time, the Negro Leagues were probably the stronger league with the top teams, at least. But I'm sure they would have taken you. And the other interesting thing was, as much as we kind of focus on the racism aspect, which don't get me wrong, big aspect in this, what is the other thing that has never changed in the history of baseball is the reason integration took so long on top of racism is economics. And for those who don't know how it worked with the Negro League teams, is they would travel and they would barnstorm and they would go to a city and they would be huge draws, and the fans would come out. And I saw estimates that when the top teams would go to town over the course of a year, like in New York, the owner of the Yankees would make an additional $100,000 a year in 1940s money. So that's a crud ton. So owners didn't really want to integrate because they knew once integration happened, then when those teams barnstormed, it wouldn't be as big of a deal and they would lose a huge revenue stream. So it was kind of fascinating to realize that, like all things in baseball, progress was stopped because of owner greed. On top of, again, racism is part of it. I can't deny that, but it is, as you've seen a lot of times with baseball, the money side of it. I know you were going to talk about like where they played, Cleveland had their own teams, and we could talk about the Buckeyes, and when Andre was on, we talked about the Akron Tire Irons. But like when the big teams came to town, where did you find that they played?
Well, I mean, this is interesting. What I pulled up was the Cleveland Buckeyes, who I really like, by the way. When Cleveland wears those jerseys, I would like to see more of those coming back again. I mean, part of me kind of hoped the name change they would get the Buckeyes, but I kind of knew Ohio State wasn't going to let them do that. But in 1945, so the Indians won the World Series in 48. In 45, the Cleveland Buckeyes won the Negro League World Series, and they wound up playing. They won in 4 games. They wound up playing Game 1 at Cleveland Stadium down by the lake. They played Game 2 at League Park. They played Game 3 on the 3 and 4 on the road, and Game 4 was at Shibe Park, which is later known as Connie Mack Stadium. But so they played at both of Cleveland's home parks at the time, the 1945 Negro League World Series. And I actually got a chance to go to League Park it's been about 9 years now, I want to say. I was working for the News Herald, and I covered a couple of high school tournament games that played out there. And if you're in the Cleveland area at all, I highly recommend going to League Park. It is not as good as the Negro League Museum, as we've heard about a lot on Guardians broadcast, but there is a great museum there of baseball history, and it includes the Negro Leagues, it includes the Caribbean Leagues, other barnstorming stuff like Jeff just talked about. Highly recommend going up there to the Baseball Heritage Museum. There is just a ton of cool stuff out that way, and the ballpark just looks fantastic as well on that area. They have redone it very well, and it has really benefited youth leagues and the high school leagues out in Cleveland.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it's and for people being like, you haven't mentioned the Kansas City Monarchs. Yes, that was the preeminent team. That's where Jackie Robinson came from when he broke the color barrier in 1947. Same year, Larry Doby would be the first American League player. For those who don't know, this is something else I hadn't realized until I read the book. Jackie Robinson's brother, Mac, finished second to Jesse Owens in the Berlin Olympics, 0.4 of a second behind him. So as much as we hear, and rightfully so, about Jesse Owens, how about that athletic Robinson family? And gosh, I'm blanking. Jackie Robinson, I believe, played with Monty Irvin, who was a great outfielder for the Giants with a basketball team. There was 3 future, 10-year veteran MLB players on this California Red Devils team. So, it's fun little things like that. Now, the player mentioned at the top was not one of the most famous ones. Joe Caffey, who was nicknamed Rabbit. In the quote, it says Caffey, not Rabbit, if I want to make sure I get it right. What was fascinating about him is how many of these guys, were prospects in a way. They dominated AAA. And you look at Cleveland, Cleveland traded away some great pitching because they had, even the book claims, one of the greatest rotations of all time at various points in time. The first all-black battery happened in Cleveland. It was Sam Toothpick Jones, as he was called. He had a toothpick he'd have in his mouth. And Quincy Trope, I think I'm going to say his name wrong. And Trope would go on to manage for a lot of years in the minors and scout and was relied upon. But they would form the first battery completely black. Eventually, Cleveland traded Sam Jones because, again, they had way too many pitchers at the time, and he to the Giants, and he'd go to the Cardinals, which by all account made Stan Musial extremely happy, because there was a quote from Stan Musial saying that he could not hit him to save his life or something like that. Talked about the talent and skill level for Cleveland. That was the deal. For Ralph Kiner, which might have helped his team if Kiner hadn't just kind of started to fall apart. Big power hitter of his era. Also speaks to how much people like Jones. But obviously we talked about Larry Doby. I mentioned the first black battery. I mentioned Joe Caffey, who got a cup of coffee in the majors and was one of those great speed players. And I believe he got his cup of coffee and then was the MVP of the International League the next year, but the outfield was stuffed. There was no place for him to go. And like I said, this is just the fun when you get into this, talking about all of the players in the history. Now, we also know that Frank Robinson was the first African-American manager in baseball, Cleveland. And we can jump to football and talk about how the Browns broke the color barrier as well. And again, I think that's something, as Cleveland fans, it's a really nice thing to be proud of. The city was very progressive with its sports. And again, Cleveland doesn't get good. They win in 48 when you have Satchel Paige coming out of the pen on that World Series team, I believe. You got Larry Doby in the outfield. I'm trying to remember if Luke Easter was in first base or not. Luke Easter had a great quote when I was doing the research where people were like, listen, this Coastal League, he started out in the West Coast League, it's going to be a racist. You're going to have to deal with a lot. And he goes, once I start hitting the home runs, no one's going to care the color of my skin, basically. Now, the Sporting News instead printed that is, no one's going to give none that, dare done that about that color, about them. Sporting News, not me, took his whole, it's ridiculous. You can go back and be like, they literally changed his quote to make it seem more country-ish, and make, instead of Luke Easter being this well-spoken man who said this great thing. So, and Luke Easter is one of those fascinating guys, just one of the biggest power hitters. Unfortunately, Cleveland, he didn't get to Cleveland until his 30s, so we didn't get to see as much of him. I want to take a moment, though, and make sure that we give everyone their due. So we're going to come back in segment 2, continue to talk about some of the players who maybe didn't get mentioned. Some of the guys who, I mean, the hype on these guys was extremely high. I mean, honestly, these were kind of the first level of prospects. This is before the draft. So this is your first kind of prospect chatter. And we'll get into that on a moment on today's Locked On Guardians. First, FanDuel. That's right. FanDuel, our newest, one of our newest. We keep getting new ones all the time. Thank you to everyone who is joining up and sponsoring the show. We're past the midway point of the NBA season. It's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Again, bet the over on the Guardians. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, again, I want to give players their due because it's, you know, it was not an easy path. That's the other thing. When players who were marginal talents, the two biggest complaints were, as I talked about in the first one being that can I go play in the Negro Leagues where you have to barnstorm? And then, you know, when you got to the major leagues, the huge amounts of racism faced by a lot of these guys, not being able to eat in the same places or stay in the same hotels as their teammates. And then the other side of it being that the conditions for, like you were always on the road. It was not an easy schedule to be a barnstorming baseball player. And maybe the most famous one was Satchel Paige, who, you know, I don't think anyone really knows for sure what his age was, but, you know, he was supposedly in his 40s, I believe, when he came to Cleveland and, you know, pitched into his 40s and was, in effect, wasn't just like a gimmick. Like, he was a good reliever at his age, went and pitched for the St. Louis Browns and the Kansas City Athletics after that, not before, after that. Minnie Minoso would go on to become like Mr. White Sox virtually. And so the annoyance with Minnie Minoso is supposedly I in the book, they claim that Cleveland had a trade they wanted to get done, and it netted them, I believe, early win. He was a great pitcher for them. And they had to debate between Minnie Minoso or Harry Simpson. I'd always heard that the other team had the scout who signed Minoso, so that the White Sox wanted him. You know, he was just a power hitter. Eventually, Cleveland would trade and get Minoso back, and then they would trade him again. And then the player they got in that trade, they would flip to Detroit, and I'm blanking on who that is, who became Norm became a great first baseman on those great 70s Tigers teams. And instead, Cleveland got Derek Dietrich's grandfather. But Minoso actually did get to play a few years in Cleveland, signed as a very young player. People don't sometimes realize that Don Newcomb, pitched in Cleveland towards the end of his career. I remember as a kid, I believe, you know, he won one of the first Rookie of the Years. Looking at that in my almanac. Yes, I was that kid who read through the almanac I had. I didn't read the whole thing, but I definitely read the baseball sections, cover insert to insert, I guess. But he, towards the end of his career, came to Cleveland. He's one of those players I was always kind of surprised wasn't in the Hall of Fame because of how good he was at the beginning. He's also that rare player who missed time for World War II and for Korea. Served in both wars while also playing Major League Baseball. So, you know, sometimes I look at that and I'm like, maybe we should consider a player like that for the Hall of Fame a little bit more when they missed 3 years to do different wars. Luke Easter is next. He had also served in World War II, again, to give credit. And he was 49 to 54 in Cleveland. And I was trying to think, not long after that, Vic Power came in. So that was kind of the gap between there. Big power hitter. Obviously, there's Luke Easter Park with CC Sabathia Field in Cleveland to honor. what Luke Easter did. He was a power hitter before his day. Harry Simpson, a player who was called another World War II vet. Just debating. The nickname in the book was Tan Ted Williams. I was like, do I put it in there? Do I not put it in there? But that was his at the time. And that's if you want to go back and think that like why they didn't want to trade him. Very strong wrists. Instead, he became like have suitcase will travel. But played for, a lot of years in the big leagues. Another one of those guys who was like a high-end prospect, right? Before we had prospects. Mentioned Sam Jones before, another World War II vet who played for many teams and was also through the first, I believe, no-hitter for any African-American pitcher. But that was not in Cleveland, but he started his career in Cleveland. Mentioned Quincy Troopy, who played 1 year, and he was a 5-time Negro League All-Star. Dave Pope was had 1 season in, I want to say, or no, he was multiple years, another vet on Cleveland's bench. I feel like his best years were in Baltimore when I read a section in the book. Dave Hoskins was a hitter who became a pitcher who dominated the Texas League back when that was a big deal and back when players of color couldn't. And it was, I think, I'm trying to remember, it was Larry Doby. Someone recommended him, but it was when he switched to pitching that he stood out. Al Smith. It's one of those guys, another guy with Minnie Minoso that got traded to the White Sox that the Guardians probably, or the Indians at the time, probably regretted that deal as he had a long career. Jose Santiago, I did not find as much on. He played for the Guardians. And then Joe Caffey was the last player that I had in there. But when I went through, it was 13 players. Cleveland had a big role in this. They were very smart in this. And it was through integration that those teams got very good. This team was, if you listened to my show a year ago when I got deep in the weeds of history, Cleveland, it's funny that Tris Speaker has the all-time WAR. I believe he's number 1. They got him because Boston refused to pay him. And so it's a funny thing. You look back in history, Cleveland outbid Boston for the best player in baseball, and they had a really good team. And then after the 1920s, kind of falls apart and it goes kind of dormant until the 40s. Finding guys like Bob Feller, Bob Lemon helps, but then the next step was that integration. And then you had the 40s and the 50s, and then it kind of went away.
Yeah.
And it's, and I know I didn't even really mention Larry Doby. I feel like everyone has to know Larry Doby by now. He breaking the color league, the color barrier in the American League. The fact is, people knew he was coming. Like Jackie Robinson, I always get this wrong. Jackie Robinson went straight to the majors, right? Whereas Larry Doby had to deal with the minors. Like he had to go through and kind of, and that's the other thing that's interesting too. Just because the era there was not TV, at least everywhere. It was not as uniform, so there were tons of minor league teams, and it was something that really mattered. People cared sometimes more about the minor league team than their major league squad. So it was a very passionate thing when a player was on that minor league squad. And Larry Doby, and it's kind of just the way it was in that era. Like they did trade Larry Doby away. He did come back. Almost no one stayed their whole career. As much as we talk nowadays about like spending their whole career with a team, that really wasn't a thing. But yeah, I think it is important. Like I said, I'm looking forward to going through and reading the rest of this. It's a lot of nice one-hitters on information they could find. I found this book because I was looking for more information on Joe Caffey when I read the 3 seconds to first base. And, I'd probably be remiss with our Star Wars referencing if I didn't mention Bingo Long's Traveling All-Stars, starring one Billy D. Williams as Bingo Long, who's essentially Satchel Paige. In that movie. So we didn't mention that in our baseball movie one. So I should probably throw that out there as well at this point in the show. But it's a rich history. I'm not doing it justice. I know there's things I'm missing and forgetting. I'm just this I don't know. Like I said, I'm a Lebanese white kid who grew up loving baseball and loves all aspects of it and relishes the overall history. And yeah, it'd be great if any of the family members of any of these players would like to come on and tell us about their grandfather, uncle, dad. We would gladly have them on the show and give more due to someone like Joe Caffey, who probably has never gotten the due they fully deserve. But I'll just extend that right now, even without asking Justin, because I know Justin would agree with me anyways. But
Absolutely.
we will throw that out there.
Absolutely.
But before we get into our next segment and all things kind of about the current now Cleveland Guardians baseball side of things, we're going to take a quick sponsor break and then be back talking baseball. Do you want to lead us off and do our third segment here on the show today?
Yeah, after that good history lesson there. So we really didn't address that Shane Bieber was named the opening day starter again for this year. Really no surprise. This will be his fourth ever. I know you have some history on that as well, but I thought it would be fun to take a peek into the crystal ball because we've done it a couple times in the show. And, he's making his fourth straight opening day start for Cleveland. Who is going to start the next 4 season openers for Cleveland? So do you want to quickly, do you have the guys up who made the guys who have made 4 starts?
Oh, before we do that, I just want to do one more shout out. The one thing that's kind of started our original talk in the Negro League, I forgot to mention, is MLB The Show is going to have Negro League players represented wearing the uniforms. And the only one of the Cleveland players I mentioned today who is going to be in that is Leroy Satchel Paige. So that is something I wanted to make sure to include that I forgot to include when I was looking at my notes in front of me for the show. Yes, I do have notes. So I know Corey Kluber is one of them off the top of my head. And then Bob Feller, Stan Kovaleski, going back to those 20s team. And then was it Gaylord Perry?
Wow.
Yes, it is Gaylord Perry. And then the other players who did it, but didn't, because those are the ones who did it 4 years in a row.
Right.
And I saw that in the Zach Meisel piece. I wouldn't have known that ahead of time on The Athletic. I do want to give him his credit. Then it was Lemon, so what I wrote down from that piece, it was Lemon, Sabathia, Nagy, Addy Joss, and then Willie Mitchell, who I was not familiar with. I at least knew all the other ones. So it is a rare elite company because, especially nowadays, you don't get a lot of guys who can break in that quickly, be that good, and that you're able. I mean, because Bieber, this is going to be his 4th opening day. He's only going to probably pitch 5 years in Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, 2019 was the last time he didn't start an opening game. It was Corey Kluber. So they went from, not a lot of guys who were capable of doing that. And then because they had a lot of transition, you had Justin Masterson, some other randos in there in the beginning, and then Kluber for a couple of years, and then straight to Bieber. So, okay, we have talked a couple of times about how is Shane Bieber going to be here next year? We both think by next January he'll be wearing a different jersey. So your 2024 opening day pitcher, not home opener, but just the guy who's pitching the first game of the season. Who is it? Shane Bieber? Is it somebody else for you?
So the minute you asked me about this, I immediately wanted to be like Corbin Burns just to steal your thunder.
How dare you? How dare you?
I knew you were going to go to me first, and I was like, I should say Corbin Burns just to be a jerk here. Sorry, it's those ums and ahs when I'm right by the mic are probably like super loud. I mean, I'm going to lean Tristan McKenzie right now. I think barring a trade or barring, Bybee or Williams, who are, I mean, they are making waves at camp. They're not going to be able to hide those two guys from Tito for long. And hey, if these two make a lot of waves and they're under a 40-man crunch, we should maybe do just an episode in the future, like finding the next Will Benson deal. Like, where is it going to make sense? Like, everyone's kind of focused on the Dodgers, but it might be more the Padres, a team that doesn't have depth. So that's for another day. But, if they have to start clearing 40-man spots, if they have to, I know people sometimes are like, you're not getting as good of a return on your asset that way. Yeah, to a degree, but you also can't sit on it till there's no value. Like, I mean, look at staying on Bradley Zimmer till they basically got no return, as opposed to trading Will Benson at arguably peak value. Like, you sometimes have to realize you got a logjam, you got to figure things out. But I would lean McKenzie right now.
Can I say Corbin Burns? Like, can I just break the trade, or can I say Tristan McKenzie? Fine. Okay, I'll say Corbin Burns for 2024. 2025, who is your opening day starter?
I still lead McKenzie because I feel like once a guy settles in, it's probably him. though I will change it in 26, even though I don't know when McKenzie is a free agent. I believe he would not. Now I got to go look that up. But
I think it's 2027 for him. So I think you're
so then 2026 would be his trade year, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2025. So you've got 2
Yeah.
straight years, Tristan McKenzie. Okay. Let's see. I'll do Burns for next year, and then 2025. I will say Tristan McKenzie with you. So he has got 1 more year after that. So all right, 2026. This is the third year in the future. Who is the 2026 opening day starter?
So in my head, I'm only really debating 2 guys, and it's Espino and Bybee. And like if Espino can be healthy, and let's be honest, a lot of the news we have seen or the response to Espino's injury has been pretty healthy. For as much as people got mad when I was like, I'm sure the takes are rational when this injury happened. It's like we're seeing like Jonathan Mayo act like it's no big deal recently. And yeah, someone's like, well, he works for MLB. Again, I've got the tin foil in here, so I could be like, they just want to hide his injury because they want the young stars to not be. But in actuality, it's we'll see what happens with him. I'm going to lean towards Bybee again, just health. And I think the stuff is, listen, no one's stuff in the minors compares to Espino. If Espino's healthy, he's DeGrom light. I'll go ahead and say that. I mean, that's a big comp, but you look at the fastball slider, you're talking 270 grade pitches. Who else has that?
DeGrom
so
and maybe Garrett Cole.
Yeah. It's so, and that's also why you don't trade him, because you want to trade for 25 cents on the dollar, or do you want to hope you roll, hit the money line and get Jacob DeGrom light? So I'll go with Bybee because it's just a higher percentage chance of outcome. But now that we have talked about how safe he is, we have put the mother of all jinxes. So I apologize to the entire Bybee family. Right now, if there is any injury this year, this is our fault. I'll just own that.
I didn't want to think about that. Yeah, so 20, what did I say? 24 is Burns, 25 is McKenzie, 26 I will also go Tanner Bybee with you. So that's 3 years. All right, Jeff, 2026, where I can't believe we're talking about 2026. It seems like a normal year, but that is the 4th year here. So yeah.
Well, if I'm going to go Bybee, then
wait, is that 2024? I'm doing the math again. This is not good.
Okay, so we're in 24
or 2027. We're doing 2027. So we did the first 3. So
the 27, I'm still saying Bybee.
I agree, Tanner Bybee. Yeah. I think I'll go with Tanner Bybee. My dark horse is it might be Justin Campbell. I don't know.
I was going to say he was the other guy who got to pop in my head, just because if he gets the Cleveland spin, like I don't want to say like the Cleveland bounce because it's not like, but the Cleveland spin, it's like him, or it's like Parker Messick has a lot of reasons he could potentially
jump there.
But we know this team, so it's going to be none of those guys. Like it's the breakout is always like, Shane Bieber was never a top 100 prospect. Corey Kluber is never a top 100 prospect. Carlos Carrasco was a very high prospect, but essentially washed out before he had the case of the hitting everybody in sight, where I had I could go pull up the tweets I got the receipts of people being like, oh, let's cut him. He's and I'm like, let's be like my whole let's be patient thing kind of started there. I remember laying on the floor at my grandmother's watching him bean people and like, let's calm down. It'll be okay. So yeah, it's probably someone we don't even know. It's probably like, I don't know. Let's go look at one of these day 3 picks from last year. Who's going to be the guy? Maybe a day 2 pick that we're not giving enough credit to.
It's gonna be Jack Leftwich, or it's gonna be Austin Peterson.
Yeah. So your guy or my guy? Which?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I like them both. I like Jack Leftwich, but yeah. All right. So that's the next 4 years. You don't have to worry about it. We can just tell Tito pencil in Corbin Burns next year when they trade Bieber, and after that you just pencil in McKenzie for a year and you let Bybee slide in, and then after that that's Tanner Bybee time, and then you get the core 3. I don't know. I don't want to say core 4, the core 3 though, the big 3. And if they can find anybody healthy behind, if Cantil or Cody Morris can stay healthy, they can go with the big 4.
Yeah, and then you got Allen, you got so many things. It's such a fun situation.
It is. Yeah. They're not all going to pan out. I know we get excited about it. They're not all going to pan out. Some, like you said, you probably not put the hex on anybody.
Before we go, can I throw a quick update?
I suppose.
Yeah. So last week I mentioned Ryland Zamrowski, who was tearing things up at Miami of Ohio. And then I dug into his story. I've since talked with with some family members through DM. And I want to, again, especially if you're in the area, recommend checking out this story, because on top of him being 6'5", listed at 6'6" now, 215, and won't turn 21 till May with 6 home runs so far this year. Turns out Ryland is very awesome about his he is awesome, but he's also open about his diagnosis of autism and has overcome a lot to get where he is. And it's kind of a fantastic story as a special ed teacher, as someone who spent a year, teaching, spent a decade working with children with autism. Yes, I know. If you're watching on YouTube, something just fell.
I'm not laughing at Jeff's job. I'm laughing at something just fell on his camera.
Something just fell in the background. So just to make that laugh seem not inappropriate. So I think it's just a really interesting story. I think he's you look at the base stuff. There's stuff there that is draftable, but I think the overall story is great because I think of all the kids through the years. I mean, some of them I now know who are in their 20s on Facebook friends with, who still go and do their athletics and do like every Special Olympics event, because Special Olympics, sometimes gets a bad rap or an understanding of like it not being competitive. And it totally is. And it totally isn't. It depends on the kid and it depends on what's appropriate. But here's a player who has a diagnosis that you don't often see excelling at a Division I level. So I think he was already an interesting story, but now I'm really pulling for him. And I think it's going to be really something kind of amazing to check out and watch and see. Right now, if you're curious, his batting average is 326, 392 on base percentage, and an 804 slugging, which from what I understand is pretty decent. An ISO of 478. So yeah, and also point this out: when you are a small school like Miami, you face your hardest schedule at the start of the year. Conference play is easier. It gets the other way around. Like if you're a big school, you kind of want to look at those numbers. So it's kind of fun when you add that in. So yeah, I think he played in the Northwoods last year, and I missed that. If he plays in the Northwoods again this year, I'm going to be out checking that out. But I wanted to kind of follow up because I think it is a rare story. It's a fantastic story, and it's already, to me, a feel good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Keeping an eye on, especially the draft this year. Real quick, I'll just note that we had 18 people join the Locked On Guardians Fantasy League. Jeff,
I was last.
Yes, Jeff. It's 12. You made it 20. You and I made it 20. So okay. Jeff and I are both in. Thanks to 18 of you who are interested. That's amazing. I was just telling our channel manager at Locked On MLB that this league had so much interest. I couldn't believe when people first started commenting, I was like, oh, hopefully we'll get 8 or 10, and 8. It ended up being 18 people who wanted to get in this league. And I wonder if there's even more who might have missed out. But thank you for your interest. The draft will be Saturday, March 25th at 9:00. So it's on Yahoo. If you signed up, hopefully you got the notification. Just a standard snake draft, and really looking forward to joining in on that. And I was hoping we could do it on a day where you and I can record and draft, but I feel like that'd be kind of chaotic recording. But I
don't know. Maybe we can try throw it up as a bonus, or throw it up on.
I'm not doing anything. My fiance is going to a John Mayer concert that night, so that is why I scheduled the draft that night. So I will be here. Maybe I'll record myself.
Which day is it again?
Saturday, March 29th, March 25th. Jeez.
That's the beginning of my spring break, so I have to see. But at night, I'm typically pretty free. So if it's not here, we'll put a link, and maybe we'll do it on Justin's Guardians of the Future. We'll figure out a way.
We'll figure it out.
Fun. And that way, if it's a Guardians of the Future, we can say whatever we want and not have to worry about.
Good point. Yeah. And then final thoughts, Jeff. WBC. No Richie Palacios yesterday tonight for Team Netherlands, unfortunately. His brother, Josh, is starting in right field. As we're recording this, it's about a half hour away from first pitch. I will have it on. I know Jeff is excited to stay up all night and watch it. He's going to get up at 6 a.m. and watch tomorrow's Chinese Taipei matchup with I don't know who they're playing, but I know Jeff will be on to watch that tomorrow morning. Looking forward to your thoughts tomorrow, Jeff.
I couldn't name all the teams in the tournament.
I did a bracket. If anyone's curious, I'm such a nerd. I did a bracket. I have it on Twitter. I have. I'll just spoil it for you. I have Dominican Republic winning because chalk, but I have them facing Venezuela. I have USA getting knocked out in the quarterfinal by Venezuela, and I have Venezuela actually beating
Team Bahamas the whole way. Because if they win, they have to invite me to their celebration party because I'm picking them to win.
That would be Great Britain. I don't have Great Britain. Great Britain's got to get past USA, Mexico, Colombia, and Canada. Good luck, guys. It's a nice story, but I do have the Netherlands making out of the first round, I will say.
But I'm gonna say Bahamas win it all, and the rule is they have to invite me to their celebration down there when they win. That's my stance. I think that's fair. But thank you for listening, rating and reviewing, downloading. It helps. keep tuning in, and we'll keep having fun things. Help us drive the show. Tell us what you want to hear, see, watch, and go Guardians, go.